And action. Welcome back. I'm Joe Wilson with Preferred Wealth Management, coming at you live from a kitchen with another exciting video. This one is how to invest in the US for beginners. So this is going to be some key points to keep in mind when we're looking to get started investing. Keep in mind this presentation is just general explanation and education only. Please do not take this as advice. When starting to invest, the behavior is more important than the amount. What this means is when you're looking to get started investing, you are probably not in a place where you're flush with cash. You probably don't have a whole lot extra. But that doesn't matter. What truly matters is to get started, whether that be $20 a paycheck, $50 a month, whatever you can afford, start putting that away because that's going to ingrain in you that behavior. And then over time, as you start getting some extra cash, you can start increasing that amount each month and it'll balloon up into a very large number. And how does this work? Well, let's take a look. Let's pretend you're 20 years old. You've got $1,000 that you could put away into some sort of an investment, which I think is pretty reasonable because if you start working at 18 and you're putting $50 away a month, you could easily get to $1,000. And so at 20 years old, you got $1,000. If you were to invest it in the stock market, which historically has had about 10% returns, and you keep that invested all the way until you're 65, that number balloons up to almost $73,000. There's a 73x multiplier from 20 to 65 at a 10% growth rate. That's huge. And that's just taking into account that $1,000. Just imagine if you continue to keep putting in every month, how much bigger that number gets. The first thing I would do if I was looking to invest is if you have an employer match on your 401k, I would do that. Reason being, this is just free money. It's free money the employer is giving you. So let's just pretend there's a scenario where you work for an employer, you get 100% match in the first 4% of your salary, and then they'll do 50% of the next two. This was actually the scenario for a company I used to work for. So for simplicity's sake, we'll say, hey, you're making $100,000. I realize it's not always reasonable, but hey, it'd be pretty cool if you did, right? So 6% of $100,000, you'd be putting in $6,000 into your 401k every year. Your employer would be putting in 5% of your salary or $5,000. So instead of just that $6,000, now you're getting $11,000 put in. And if we go back to the previous slide and think about that compound interest, just imagine how much that's going to grow as time goes on. The next is the power of the emergency fund. You may be thinking, Joe, what does an emergency fund have to do with investing? I'll tell you. The whole point of an emergency fund is that when unexpected expenses occur, which they inevitably will, you can use that emergency fund to pay for them as opposed to having to use something like a credit card because that interest rate on a credit card is just going to kill you over time. And so what is an emergency fund? We simply say 3 to 6 months of expenses. It's a great place to be. Now, I understand that if you're just starting out, that can be really hard to get to. Seems like a lot. Start with $1,000. Take a page out of the old Dave Ramsey book and say $1,000 emergency fund to start with. That's going to cover a lot. Now, if you're also thinking, Joe, I don't really have emergency expenses. I'm just a single person and what have you. I mean, let's think about it, guys. We're human beings. Stuff goes wrong. If you got a car, God knows that's going to break down eventually. So there's always going to be an emergency. There just will be of some sort. So make sure you got your emergency fund. Next, once again, may not be directly tied to investing, but I assure you once again it is. This is going back to those credit cards. Prioritize paying off your high interest debt. I mean, when it comes down to it, something like a credit card that could be paying or charging you over 20% in interest, it's going to benefit you a lot more in the long run to pay that off as opposed to investing. And the reason is because it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to find an investment that's going to make 20% plus in a given year. You may think of things like, well, what about NVIDIA stock? Yeah, but I mean, what are the chances that you're going to find in the other types of stock like an NVIDIA? It's very low. So, I base this on the current time period that I'm talking about right now, and it's September of 24. Right now, with current interest rates, you can have very low risk investments that'll pay you, 5, maybe 5.5%. So in that case, if the interest rate on your debt is under 5%, then there's a good likelihood that you're going to make more in the market right now. So in turn, you may be better off investing. Whereas if your interest rate is above 6%, then you're probably better off paying down your debt because you're not going to make as much in investments, or at least there's not a high likelihood of that. So when it comes down to it, you're just comparing interest rates. So take a look at your debt, understand the interest rates, and whether or not there's a high likelihood that you're going to be able to make more than that investing it. Next, we're finally into the investments, right? Invest in your HSA. You can invest your HSA. Yes, you can. And not only that, if someone were to ask me, which nobody has yet, but hopefully they will, Joe, what's the best investment account there is out there for someone? I would tell you HSA, because it is triple tax advantage. Triple. Tax-free when you put the contributions into the account. If you invest it, it will grow tax-free. You don't pay any taxes on that either. And then when you withdraw it, that is also tax-free as long as it is used for medical expenses. It's amazing. So if you have an HSA, take advantage of this. Most people put in their HSAs, but don't realize they can invest them. Not all HSAs can be invested, but I would say the majority of them can. Next thing I would do for most people is to open an IRA, and it's likely going to be a Roth IRA. Why is it likely to be a Roth IRA? Well, when people ask the question, should I do traditional IRA or Roth IRA? It comes down to one question. Are you in a lower tax bracket now, or are you in a lower tax bracket when you're going to be pulling this money in your retirement? The problem is the answer to that question is unknown because you can't tell the future. And you can't tell what tax brackets are going to do in the future. You don't know what your income is going to be in the future. But for most young people, it is very likely you're making less income now than you're going to in the future. So that's why a Roth is probably the best way to go. But anyone with earned income can open an IRA. I get a lot of questions about, okay, can I open up an IRA for my kid? Hey, as long as they have earned income and are filing a tax return, absolutely. Base your investments on your risk capacity and risk tolerance. So risk capacity is where you're at in your investing life cycle. Young people have a higher risk capacity than old people. Now, risk tolerance, that's how you feel about investing. For some people, investing makes them extremely nervous. For other people, they're all about the volatility. So once again, you got to base this on your individual self. Discipline. Now we're back to the consistent investing every single month. Try to keep doing that. I have seen time and time again people that say, I'm going to stop investing for a little while. I had some bills come up. It's understandable, but it just makes it that much harder to start going again. And if you do want to open up IRA, a trusted financial advisor can help with setting this up, or you can do it yourself. There's plenty of custodians out there. Lastly, if you want to talk about investing and a key point to take in mind, I would say try to maximize your retirement accounts. That's because they have tax benefits associated with them. You can see here are all the maximum limits for 2024 for all the different types of common retirement accounts. So I'm not going to go through every single one of them. The main thing I would tell you is for simple IRAs and 401ks, you'll see the little note underneath, the footnote. The max does not include employer contributions. So keep that in mind. I've had some people get confused about that and say, oh yeah, I've already hit my max because my employer puts in $5,000 per year. You don't take that into account for those specific accounts. Now, for a health savings account, HSA, it does include the employer contribution. So please take that into account when if you're trying to max out these accounts, which I would strongly suggest. So that's it. As always, if there's anything I can do to help out, or if you have any questions, please reach out to the information provided below. Otherwise, look forward to seeing you next time.